I would talk about 3 points. The first thing I would like to give you kind of my observation on U.S. China relations. Well, Trump 2.0 is like a climate change rather than a storm from Beijing's perspective. That means Trump 2.0 could have very profound implications on not only U.S. domestic and foreign policy, but with significant implications on U.S. China relations. Well, I think the recent national security strategy is a declinement on the end of the post-World War II international order the U.S. has established. Not only just a post-Cold War order, but post-Cold War World War II, the very end of a liberal international order. And I think a big question is that what is the post-hegemonic order will look like? And what does this new order mean for everybody? People talk about a G0. G0 means no country want to play kind of a hegemonic role in maintaining the order. While China itself has a big problem in sustaining its economic boom, the economic difficulties are very prominent. So can China, shoulder the responsibility in future order? There's still a question mark. While Trump has made a very important change, as Secretary Marco Rubio said, the U.S. has to be adaptive to the multipolar world. America usually, doesn't like multipolar wording. And actually, this May, when I joined the workshop in New York with Dr. Panda and Dr. Zhen, I found many American colleagues, they talk about multipolar world. I think that's a sea change on the U.S. foreign policy thinking. This morning, some scholars talk about multipolar world, actually, Professor T.V. Paul, may be equal to sphere of influence thinking. And actually, last month, I met with former U.S. Assistant Secretary Daniel, who is now with the Asia Society, Daniel Russell, and he also talked about this point. China's new foreign policy buzzword actually is also multipolarity. But if you pay more attention to the wording, the statement released by Chinese Central Committee's work on foreign policy in 2023, the new buzzword is orderly multipolarity. That shows Beijing's concerns with the turbulence, with the instability in this transition. So that could be meaningful. While Trump talked about G2 in recent U.S. China summit in Busan, and also after that summit, U.S. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of War, Peter Hegseth, also said the historic G2 meeting between Trump and Xi sets the tone for everlasting peace. Well, I think Beijing is now making efforts to decode the meaning or the implications of the new G2 rhetoric of the Trump administration. However, I'm not so optimistic because the U.S. side is still, thinking that China is a near-peer adversary. And there are so many China hawks, even outer hawks in the Trump administration. So the U.S.-China summit in South Korea was a good start to reprioritize but it did not represent an end to tensions. And I think the two sides are very, very, hard to have revitalize mutual trust, especially in the military and the security field. So the Xi-Trump summit in Busan just a tactical detente rather than a strategic reset for bilateral relations. Secondly, I want to talk about the regional dimension. The first thing I think Beijing is concerned about is the implications, the very complex implications of the U.S. retrenchment, U.S. strategic retrenchment in this region, maybe across the globe. But if you look at the new national security strategy, the U.S. side mentioned balance of power rather than domination when it comes to the Indo-Pacific strategy part. Well, in this part, actually, many words are on China. And the strategy insists that the U.S. should increase its efforts to engage in economic competition with China in this region. Well, last year, the two-way trade volume between China and ASEAN is about $1 trillion US dollars. And the US ASEAN trade volume is it's just almost half of China ASEAN trade volume. So the economic power, in terms of economic power, I think maybe China has its advantage. The second thing is the linkage between different hotspots issue in this region. That's the key challenge to deal with the increasing nexus between Taiwan question, South China Sea question, and the Korean Peninsula question. So we see a linkage, a nexus among this very difficult security hotspots issue. While Trump administration has approved its first arms sale to Taiwan after U.S. China summit in Busan, the U.S. side is pushing Taiwan to increase its military budget to 3% of GDP. U.S.-Taiwan cooperation in military exercises, troop training, and intelligence sharing is also depending. Well, there are almost 1,000 U.S. military personnel in the Taiwan island, help to train Taiwan troops. And Taiwan troops was not only sent to Guam, but also sent to Michigan to be trained by the U.S. side. So those moves are perceived by Beijing as kind of a U.S. revisionism on Taiwan issue, but it's like a chicken egg, issue. Another thing is about the linkage between different regions, especially the interaction between Asia Pacific and Europe in the aftermath of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. While some colleagues mentioned the increasing military cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang actually is a significant factor that makes the Korean Peninsula situation more complicated. But I also want to mention, South Korea has agreed to set up kind of a military industry base in Poland and other European countries. So South Korea is very, very powerful in terms of military industries, actually. So we can say the interaction between the Europe and Asia Pacific. The third thing I want to mention is the very challenging task is how to manage U.S.-China military-to-military relations. Last month, we had a U.S.-China security dialogue in Guizhou province in China. We have former Commander-in-Chief of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral Dennis Blair, and former Commander of U.S. Marine, Admiral David Berger, and those American participants, they have a strong willingness to enhance the communication between the two militaries. Given the increasing military activities of both U.S. and China militaries, there is a significant risk that some incidents may happen, which can lead to serious escalation. But the good thing is that in early November, U.S. Secretary of War Peter Hegseth held a meeting with China's Minister of Defense, Dong Jun, in Malaysia. So the two sides are making efforts to mitigate such tension. So lastly, I would spend the remaining 1 minute on peace on the Korean Peninsula. I had the honor to have my piece published by EAI on your website on South Korea issue. My bottom line is that this issue is becoming more complicated due to the heightened tensions between two Korea, due to Russia-Ukraine conflict, and due to the development or rapid development of North Korea's nuclear and other conventional capabilities in recent years. Well, in this regard, China has a dilemma. So on one hand, China has to deal with U.S. China new Cold War to think about the possible Taiwan contingency. So on the other hand, China it's not in China's interest to see a nuclear DPRK, a nuclear Japan, a nuclear South Korea. So last November, when I was in New York to meet with chairwoman of Asia Society, Madame Kang, the former ROK foreign minister, she raised a very important question to Chinese colleagues. Is Beijing ready for a nuclear forest in Northeast Asia or in Asia? I think it's a very important question. But I would say it hinges upon ROK to provide plausible, staged plan and also provide alternative rhetoric on the end game or on the objective of Korean Peninsula. So ROK is very, very critical in pushing forward our efforts in safeguarding peace and stability in the peninsula, in this peninsula. Professor Ha talked about the importance of complex arrangements. So what kind of complex arrangements look like? I identify several points. The first thing is about improved governmental exchanges between China and South Korea. Secondly, how we can empower and enrich crisis management mechanism. We need to address risks of military clashes, such as intercepting test missiles, attacking missile launchers, and waging cyber warfare. And now we are seeing the evolving nature of technology and AI-driven warfare. So that could be more difficult to have effective crisis management mechanism. And the essence of the Korean Peninsula is a security issue rooted in the persistent failure to establish a peace regime. So it needs to explore the possibility of a four-party dialogue among U.S., China, North Korea, and South Korea to sign a peace treaty. I stop there. Thank you very much.